presenting Sunshine, a time in Jamaica. There was a time in our sunshine island, Jamaica, long before the arrival of Columbus. There was a people much more older, indigenous, and much more endemic to the region once known as Americana, now known as Yarda, Jamaica. Historical data has proven that these people occupied, resided in, owns, developed, and lived in Jamaica long before Columbus and the Spanish British insurgents, occupation, and genocide of these people. They lived here before the Taino people who speak the native indigenous Arawaki language. These people are known as the Siboney people. Their line is traced back to the original Alkebolite Ethiopic Hebrew Ashanti people. Hence, the term Ashanti Mama and Ashanti Baba. Our oral traditional great preserve a much more indigenous, original, authentic, and truthful history preserved in the Museum of Truth. These troglodyte Hebrew Ashanti people were also known as the rock dwellers, as they used to live in natural and man-made caves in the rugged outback of the most illy fertile, mountainous parts of the islands of Jamaica, Haiti, and Cuba. The practices of these miscalled Jamaican maroon people suggested that the people they referred to as the so-called maroon people are these people. Sunshinier time in Jamaica it was, as these people were more indigenous and spiritually connected to that part of the earth they reside in. I repeat, sunshinier time in Jamaica it was, as these people were more indigenous and spiritually connected to that part of the earth they reside in. The practices of the maroon people, the revival people, the Kumina people, and Plat 60 now called Rastafarian reflected the tenets, practices, and customs of these original troglodyte Hebrew Ashantis, as I pointed out in my video docu-audiobook series, Maroon Book of Eulogies. Anthropological studies of Jamaica and its original maroon people reveals that the Rastafarian movement reflects the sum total of the roots and culture, liberty of these four groups of people mentioned earlier in this article. But it also suggested that their religious practices, cultural customs, dressings, attirements, and apparels, their nutritional intakes, medicinal practices, spice, habitual day-to-day custom, dreadlocks, hairstyle, among other clear evidences, reveals that the Siboney people are still alive and well in Jamaica. Clinton V. Black, in his book History of Jamaica, made mention of these people. Both our oral, traditional, and documented history clearly reveals that it is not only the Rastafarian group in Jamaica who can trace their lineage to these Siboney people, but a lion's sum of the populace of Jamaica and the Caribbean islands of Haiti and Cuba actually has blood connection to these people. The cultural practices of the modern population of these three islands clearly reflects their ancient practices and custom in many ways, from their religious, agricultural, musical practices to the baking of the cassava bame without yeast, reminiscent of the ancient Hebrew Ashanti Cushites, and leavened bread. The Jamaican society accept it or not practice marrying to their distant relative. This is clearly another one of the principles adopted from these ancient Hebrew Ashanti Israelites. Our patois language has a strong dose of Twiswahili and Amharic. For example, the Jamaican colloquial term dibi dibi is from the Amharic word debe, which means to tear down or destroy. Several of our names of people and places also identifies with this ancient rootical people. Names like Jericho, Samaria, Salem, Yuanes are but few other clear evidences that our line is traced back to these original people. Our folklore, such as Brother Anasi and Brother Takuma, our music, dances, ways of worship, and herbal medicinal religious practices are some other clear-cut and outstanding outstanding evidence of Hebrew Ashanti cultural renaissance and retention. The practices of communalism, revivalism, harvest celebration, and Maroon celebration of Ethiopian Christmas on January 6 set the icing on the cake. Sunshiny a time it is in Jamaica, when this truth preserved so long in the Museum of Truth become public. What do you think? Written by Fabian Stennett, copyright 2022, email fabianstennett@gmail.com. Thank you and God bless you all. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow me. Like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on blogger.com. And remember to go download my album, The Seer Still Chopping, available on all major downloading platforms, and also the EP, Three Sides of a Coin, also available on all major downloading platforms, such as Amazon, Apple, Spotify, GoStream. Thank you, and God bless you all. Welcome back to Anorak TV. Another article. Once upon a time in the history of Jamaica. Once upon a time in Jamaica's history. Once upon a time in Jamaica's history. Written by Fabian Stennett, copyright 2022. Email fabianstennett@gmail.com. Jamaica, or Sunshiny Island, paradise, possesses a rich history worthy to be highlighted on the international world stage as once upon a time in Jamaica. Rich history. The Taínos used to reside in Jamaica, as well as the Siboney Ashanti Hebrews and the Moors. Jamaica and its rich anthropological history provides clear evidence of these three indigenous groups of people even until this day. The cultural practices of the Maroons, who still bake the unleavened cassava bread, suggestive of their Hebrew connections, and their religious practices, utilizing the drums, etc., are even further evidences. The historical sites at White Mall, I repeat, the historical sites at White Mall and Guanabo in St. Catherine, Alligator Pond in Clarendon, and the Middens at Williamsfield in the hilly mountainous terrains of Kemshat in St. James, suggested the presence of Atterbury River in Trelawney as an underground stream through the cockpit area of Vaughansville, starting at Roper in Tango River, and disappeared into the Rota Sinkhole, locally called Roper Sinkhole, and travels to Deeside in Trelawney, and serve as the upper main tributary for the Marthabury River. On the other side is the Queen of Spain Valley and the Montego River. The historical Tolocastle and its pivotal role in Baptist Christmas rebellion known as the Shamsharp Rebellion in 1831 suddenly comes to mind. The cultural importance of the Maroons, the bravery of Diego Pimento, and other significant documentation reveals that the cockpit country is a natural evidence of its people, the Taínos, the Maroons, the slaves, and the peasants, all retaining a revered inner silence comparable to the deep underground water of the cockpit country, as renowned historian Don Carter Henry and Paramount Chief O.G. Francis stated, when stirred up, becomes embroiled and vulnerable, dangerous, becomes the hoisting of the Spanish flags by the Spanish invaders reset the islands and broken pattern of peace and tranquility, thus setting the pattern for resistivity against colonial occupation and the massive looting, savagery, and plundering that comes along with the Euro invaders. And it was also written once upon a time in Jamaica. Diego Pimento, the first of them all. He was a Spanish Creole defender against the attack of the English invaders in 1655. On August 4, 1655, the English invaders, after conquering Spanish town, were prevented from crossing the fording of the Rio Cabana and the Black River, and that day, Diego Pimenta and his army taught the British invaders a lesson never to be forgotten. This gave rise to a national spirit to cast off the foreign yoke of demonizing tyranny. People like Wandebola and Wansisera rose to prominence. Wandebola was ambushed and killed in a raid against the Siboney Ashanti Hebrew, often referred to as the Maroons. Our history now and once upon a time in Jamaica suggested that the original people of Jamaica are offsprings of the Ethiopians, Sudanese, and Egyptians, often referred to as the Abyssinian island or the Nile Valley people. This era is unquestionably the cradle of civilization. Therefore, it is safe to say the cultural civilization such as writing, therefore it is safe to say that cultural civilization such as writing, science, religion, medicine, astronomy, agriculture, as well as wood and metals, the music and creative artworks of the Jamaican people depicts its African Renaissance in terms of the types of drums, symbols, potteries, carvings, and day-to-day cultural practices and levity. The history of Jamaica dates back and clearly connected to the original Ethiopian Egyptian civilization, which existed long before the biblical Tower of Babel, the Egyptian towers, and the founding of the ancient Babylon by the Sumerians, and goes back to the beginning of recorded times and the Ethiopian cradle of world culture in ancient Kemet. Great Ethiopian empires like Dongola, Memphis, and Thebes play a great contribution to the development of Jamaica and its Ashanti Hebrew people. Thebes was known to the ancient Hebrew as Norway and was most influential and powerful city in the world, and was the most influential and powerful city in the world. Take note. Therefore, the skills, craftsmanships, and competencies of the Jamaican people reflects their derivatives and ancestral lineages. Between the 13th and the 15th century AD, in 1492, the last Moorish stronghold of Spain fell to the rise of white power. In this same year, the black Jews were expelled from Spain. The cruel institution called slavery was in its inception, as Spain was jealous over the Portuguese conquest and early occupation of the so-called New World. After analyzing the empirical, anthropogenical, historical evidence, it is as clear as daylight that Columbus was aware of these Moorish, Taino, Hebrew, Ashanti people who resides in the Caribbean and set out from day one to persecute, destroy, and annihilate these people by any means necessary. What do you think? Please follow me, like and share, especially on Blogger, TikTok, YouTube, by Fabian Stennett, copyright 2022. And the saga goes on. Now, we are live on Anorak TV, and we are presenting a 20-minute live program, 20 minutes of history. So we look again at the slave trade, a time in Jamaica. Slave trade, a time in Jamaica. Presented to you by Fabian Stennett, live on Anorak TV. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. Slave trade, a time in Jamaica. The slave trade was no vacation in Jamaica and was by no means a voluntary travel to Jamaica by the Africans who faced this great holocaust called the slave trade. Slavery has indeed discomfited the black population from that time until now, and is the single most deadly tool resulting in the degradation of the dark-skinned people, psychologically, spiritually, financially, and in every wise. To recapture these dull moments of slave trade, a time in Jamaica and the wider diaspora, we will revisit the implementation of the slave trade. Slavery exists in the world from the early period of civilization. This existed as an economic system which carries out the practices of selling human beings as goods and services, or as they would say, chatted property of society. Slavery from way back existed in places like Rome, Greece, and ancient Egypt. Slavery was a practice of not only some very popular universities, but also the early Christian churches, which did not frown at it nor repudiated its unmerciful, barbaric, and lawful swinged-filled transaction between the 5th and the 8th centuries, 500 to 800 AD. Priests and church officials retained slaves, and it was not until the period of 900 to 1300 AD before we saw some form of declination in this form of violation. And if we want to accept it or not, its historical projection resulted in its revival as neocolonialism, the 16th century colonizing enterprise and dogma of European kingpins such as Spain and Portugal. Early invasion of the people of the so-called New World resulted in all-out warfare with their European partners in crime, namely the Dutch, French, and the English, with people like John Hawkins, Francis Drake, and Sir Walter Raleigh, who decided to wage an unceasing warfare against Spain for 3 main reasons. Spain founded and established colonies in the New World first, so in order for the English to gain geographical knowledge and control of the New World and suppress Catholicism in this new region, they declared all-out war against Spain. Sir Walter Raleigh raided the North American mainland and returned to England with a bounty of potatoes, which becomes an agricultural novelty to the English countrysides. Francis Drake, the English sea dog, circumnavigate the world and founded new sea routes, but according to historian, let me go at that again. Francis Drake, the English sea dog, circumnavigate the world and founded new sea routes, but according to historian Don Carter Henry, it was John Hawkins and his son William Hawkins who established a lucrative commercial monopoly of the negro slave trade. They strike a deal called the Hacienda with the Spaniard, then proceeded to buy, barter, and catch slaves as a licensed commercial business to catch black African people and sell them in the Spanish colonies and part and parcel of their so-called New World. The defeats of the then feared Spanish Armada in 1588 by England destroyed the hopes and shattered the dreams of Spain's naval commercial supremacy and foothold in the New World. By 1670, the viable Second Peace Treaty of Madrid opened the New World interlinked with Africa and the colonial European, hence unlocking the lucrative Middle Passage human cargo trading route, spreading from Africa and the eastern seaboard of North America down through Mexico into the Caribbean and even Brazil, where tobacco, sugarcane, coffee, and cotton become large-scale slave-grown cash crops to be delivered to meet the supply and demand of the European markets. There was a time during the days of slavery between 1670 to 1750. The socio-economic life of Jamaica was in a state of languor according to historian Don Carter Henry and Shalman Scott. The inception of the Industrial Revolution in Europe, even with its application of machines, did not stop the indispensability of slavery, as it was most relevant and is the bloodline of colonial manipulation under the guise of slavery. From as far as Senegal to Angola and the west coast of Africa, several indigenous African tribes were herded into slave ships designated by the name slavers, and almost all circumstances birthed at a Port Coromanti to receive the Africans who were herded into captivity. The tribes included Mandingos, Fantas, Ashantis, Igbos, Waiders, Yorubas, and Kus, each tribe having their own cultural identities and behavioral patterns. The English utilized various methods to capture slaves, but their main methods was to kidnap, maim, rape, and torture during late-night raids and sleeping harmless indigenous African people. The system of barter was the most alluring and bewitching method used on Africans in its resulted in Jamaica's heritage to the past with heroic sacrifice to replete with the fact that there is no man who has not undergone sacrifices to make us positively what we are, for we were bought with a price, as Don Carton quoted, Once Upon a Time in Jamaica, written by Fabian Stennett. Resource material, Don Carter Henry, Flaming Torch of Kensington,